So you want to buy a cargo ship. Why not when you have millions of dollars resting in your pocket? Around 80% of everything you have ever bought, your phone, your shoes, the chair you're sitting in, crossed an ocean on a ship to reach you. So somewhere in the back of your head sits a simple, obvious conclusion. Whoever owns the ships that carry the entire world's stuff must be quietly and enormously rich. It's the most reasonable guess in the world, but it's also completely backwards. Because carrying the world's cargo is one of the fastest ways to go bankrupt in global business. It's a brutal and cyclical trade where freight rates can collapse by a quarter in a single year, and where the seventh largest shipping carrier on the planet once went bankrupt doing exactly this, hauling everybody's televisions across the sea. In shipping, the people who get rich almost never get rich from the shipping. So if the cargo isn't where the money is, why does the smart money keep buying $200 million ships? Here is the strange part. You're about to spend around $200 million, and on paper, you will own almost nothing. Because a modern container ship is not really a vessel. It is a floating shell company that happens to be carrying your sneakers. It is built deliberately so that no government can control it, no tax authority can touch it, and the day it stops making money, it can simply disappear. It is the only $200 million object in the world, engineered to belong to no one. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how that trick works. Means how the biggest asset most people never think about hides in plain sight, where the money actually comes from, and why the same structure that protects your fortune is the thing that will one day leave your ship rotting off a coastline with a crew slowly running out of food. Stick around, because the number at the end of this, the one about where your ship goes to die, is the part nobody tells you before they sell you one. Let's buy the ghost. First, the sticker price, because this is where the fantasy still feels normal. A brand new megaship is one of the giants that carries around 20,000 boxes and will run you north of $200 million. MSC, which is the largest carrier on Earth, took delivery of vessels in its Arena class at roughly $210 million each. That's your Ferrari of the sea. If that feels excessive, you can go smaller. A workhorse ship in the middle of the range costs somewhere between $60 and $110 million. And if you're truly economizing, a tired second-hand feeder, the little ones that shuttle between ports can be picked up for a handful of millions. So you write the check of $200 million, and you now own a ship, except you don't. Not the way you own a house, because the very first thing your new ship needs isn't a captain or a cargo. It's a nationality. Every ship on Earth has to fly a flag, it has to legally belong to a country. And you would assume a giant carrying American goods, built for a European company, would fly an American or European flag. It won't. It'll fly the flag of Liberia. Liberia is a small West African nation with a modest economy and a difficult history. It is also, right now, the single largest shipping power on the planet. Its registry holds around 5,000 ships, roughly 270 million gross tons of steel, more than any other flag on Earth. A country most people couldn't find on a map controls the largest merchant fleet in existence. Is it surprising or not? The question is why? And the answer is because Liberia isn't selling you the sea, it's selling you an escape hatch. This is the trick with the wonderfully honest name, a flag of convenience. You register your ship in Liberia or Panama or the Marshall Islands, a Pacific nation of around 40,000 people that somehow flags the third largest fleet in the world, and in return you get three things money can't buy at home. You get lower registration costs, you get crew rules where you're no longer bound by the wages and labor protections of a rich country, and most importantly, you get a place to hide. Because your ship won't be owned by you. It'll be owned by a single-purpose company that exists for one reason: to own that one ship and nothing else. One ship, one company, one flag, and one letterbox address in a country with no navy to enforce anything. If that ship causes a disaster tomorrow, the lawyers chasing you hit a shell that owns a single asset, and behind it a wall. That's the ghost. You don't own the ship the way you own a car. You own a company that owns a company that flies a foreign flag on a hull registered to an address that receives no mail. The world's only billion-dollar scale asset built on purpose so that its real owner never has to say his name. You want to see how absurd this gets? Look at the Ever Given, the ship that famously wedged itself sideways and blocked the Suez Canal in 2021, freezing a chunk of global trade for 6 days. That one ship was owned by a Japanese company, operated by a Taiwanese carrier, Evergreen, flagged in Panama, technically managed by a German firm, and crewed entirely by Indian sailors, 5 nationalities on one ship, and when the bill came due, everyone got to point at everyone else. That is not a shipping company. That is a magic trick performed with steel. So you've bought your Ghost. Now the question everyone actually asks, does this thing make money? And here's the honest answer. Moving cargo is barely the point. Yes, you can charter your ship out. Right now, a mid-sized vessel can lease for somewhere around $76,000 a day. Sounds incredible until you remember your operating costs run 20 to 30 million a year just to keep the thing crewed, fueled and floating, and that day rate swings like a heartbeat monitor. In a good year, it's a printing press. In a bad year, it's a $200 million hole you're pouring diesel into. The freight, in other words, is the volatile and exhausting part. The quiet money is somewhere else entirely. And to find it, you have to stop looking at the ship and look at the boxes. Here's the thing almost nobody realizes. The steel container, the plain metal rectangle, is often a completely separate business from the ship carrying it. And it might be the better one. There's a company called Triton about which you've never heard of. It doesn't own famous ships instead. It owns boxes over 7 million, the little 20-foot units that stack on every deck on Earth. It buys them, leases them to the shipping lines and collects rent on steel. In 2023, an infrastructure fund took Triton private in a deal valuing it at $13.3 billion. Let that sit. The company that owns the empty boxes was worth $13 billion, while a lot of the men who own the actual ships spend their nights sweating over that heartbeat day rate. The giant hull is the spectacle. The empty steel box is the cash machine. And that is the first rule. Of this business, the brochure won't print. The more boring the asset, the safer the money. Now, before we get to the part where the Ghost turns on you, I want to hear from you, the answer of a quick question, which you have to drop it in the comments. If you had $200 million, would you actually build one of these things, a real, physical, ocean-crossing ship? Or would you be the quiet one buying the empty boxes and never leaving dry land? Ship or boxes? Tell me below, because the answer says everything about what kind of rich person you'd be. And if this is your first time here, this whole channel is one long autopsy of how the wealthy actually make and lose their money, so hit subscribe. It's stupid rich math. That's the entire pitch. Okay, back to your Ghost. Because now I have to tell you what happens when the structure that protects you decides to eat you instead. Meet Hanjin. Hanjin Shipping was South Korea's largest container carrier and the 7th biggest on the entire planet. For nearly 40 years, it was one of those companies everyone assumed was too enormous to fall. It moved a real slice of the world's trade. Around 3% of all global container capacity ran through Hanjin. On August 31, 2016, it filed for bankruptcy. And here is where the Ghost structure stopped being clever and turned into a horror story. Because remember how a ship belongs to nobody, how the ownership is split across shells and flags and charters so that no single party is really on the hook. That works beautifully right up until the money stops. And the moment Hanjin's money stopped, the world discovered what a ghost ship actually looks like. Ports around the world simply refuse to let Hanjin's vessels dock out of math. A port that unloads a bankrupt company's ship might never get paid for the labor, the cranes, the berth, so they turned all of the ships away. At the peak, 92 of Hanjin's 141 ships were stranded at sea, floating in international waters, unable to come in. Now picture the number riding on those decks. Roughly $14 billion of cargo televisions, sneakers, furniture, refrigerators, Christmas inventory frozen on the water with nowhere to go. Around 400,000 containers belonging to some 8,300 different companies, all suddenly stuck on ships that no country would accept. And on those ships were human beings, crews who had done nothing wrong, floating in circles off the coast of places they were forbidden to enter, watching their food and fresh water slowly run down while lawyers on land argued about who owed whom. One of Hanjin's own labor managers described the vessels perfectly. He called them simply ghost ships. That phrase is the whole video in 2 words. The exact structure that makes a cargo ship such a beautiful place to hide a fortune. The shells, the flags, the belongs-to-no-one design is the same structure that means when it fails, no one will claim it, no port will take it, and it will drift with living people aboard until somebody somewhere releases just enough money to let it come home. Hanjin owed around $5.5 billion. Some experts, watching the chaos ripple through global trade, started calling it shipping's Lehman Brothers moment. And here's the quiet lesson buried under the drama, the one that should scare you as the new owner. Hanjin didn't die because its ships were bad. It died because in this business, you don't control a single thing that matters. Freight rates collapse, trade slows, and the elegant ghost you built to protect yourself becomes a ship that even you can't bring to shore. So that's the spine of the whole business. Now let me give you the threats nobody mentions when they're taking your 200 million, the ways this thing bites that never make the brochure. Threat 1 is that your ghost can be seized in any port on Earth over debts that aren't even yours. There's a legal concept in shipping called a maritime lien. In plain terms, the ship itself can be held responsible for money owed, unpaid fuel, unpaid repairs, and unpaid crew. It can be sometimes from a previous operator. Sail your beautiful hull into the wrong harbor, and a creditor can have it arrested the ship, physically detained while you're stuck proving it's not your problem. When Hanjin fell, creditors seized its ships in the United States, in China, and in Panama. The ghost you built to be untouchable turns out to be very touchable the moment it ties up to a dock. Threat 2 is the geography. It can quietly quadruple your bills overnight. Your ship doesn't sail on open ocean the whole way. It squeezes through a handful of narrow choke points, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, and those points are political. When the Red Sea became dangerous, carriers started avoiding the Suez route entirely and sailing all the way around the southern tip of Africa, adding thousands of miles, days of fuel, and war risk insurance premiums that spike the instant a region turns hot. Your route is never yours. It belongs to whoever is shooting near it that month. Threat 3, and this is the one I told you to wait for. The number nobody says out loud before they sell you a ship. Your ghost has an expiration date, and it does not get a peaceful retirement. Every cargo ship is bought with one appointment already on the calendar, the day it dies. And that day, for around 90% of the world's fleet, ends on one of 3 beaches in South Asia: Alang in India, Chittagong in Bangladesh, Gadani in Pakistan. Here's how the end works. You don't sell your worn-out ship to a museum. You sell it usually through an anonymous cash buyer, so your name never touches the transaction, for its weight in steel, roughly $500 a ton at a South Asian beach, a fraction of what a regulated European yard would cost you to use. The buyer points the ship at the shore, guns the engine, and deliberately runs it aground at high tide. And then men paid just a few dollars a day. Some of them children climb onto the hull with blowtorches and take it apart by hand. They cut it into pieces on the sand, with the tide washing around their feet, breathing whatever was inside. It is considered one of the most dangerous jobs on the earth, and the numbers say so plainly. In 2025 alone, at least 11 workers died taking the global fleet apart on those beaches, with dozens more injured. Around 700 ships end their lives this way every single year. And your ship, the $200 million ghost you registered in Liberia through a shell company so that nobody could ever pin it on you, will end there too, cut into scrap by a man earning less in a month than you spent on the ship's paint. Sold off piece by piece, right down to the cutlery and the lifeboats, until there is nothing left but a stain on the sand where a giant used to be. So let's do the actual math on your ghost. The optimistic version is that freight rates hold, you charter the ship out on a solid multi-year contract. Your day rate stays healthy, and after your 20 to 30 million a year in costs, the vessel prints real money for a decade. Structured right, hidden behind the right flag, it's one of the great tax-quiet, cash-generating machines in global capitalism. This is why the money keeps building them. The realistic version is that rates crack, a choke point closes, a war risk premium quadruples, a charterer walks, and your beautiful hull sits idle burning cash or worse, floats offshore as a ghost because the operator behind it just went the way of Hanjin. The difference between a great year and a catastrophic one isn't your skill. It's whether the world stayed calm, and the world does not owe you calm. And here's the reframe I'll leave you with. A house is bought to be yours. Your name is on it, proudly in public. A container ship is built to be the opposite. It is engineered from the flag to the shell to the anonymous cash buyer so that it is never quite yours, so that no country can hold it, no taxman can find you, and no lawyer can reach past the letterbox. You spend $200 million to own something whose entire life is spent pretending to belong to no one. And it keeps up that pretense right until the last day when it's dragged onto a beach in Bangladesh and cut apart by hand. Because in this business, your ship gets to be a ghost the whole way through. There's only one moment the owner's real name ever surfaces: the moment something goes wrong. If you genuinely spend $200 million on one of these, tell me in the comments which flag you'd hide behind: Liberia, Panama, or the Marshall Islands. And if you want to know which billionaire toys actually make money, and which ones quietly eat their owners alive, subscribe to our channel, because that's the only thing we do here. This has been Stupid Rich Math. Go do something smarter with your money than buying a ghost.